It's baffled scholars for 2 millennia. It is a puzzle made of multi-dimensional elements, an enigma with roots that reach back to the dawning of time, perhaps before. Daniel explained part of it. Ezekiel and Isaiah had glimpses into it. John saw it all for the time of the end. That time is now. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert on a journey that spans the course of history, from Eden to Mount Hermon, from Hermon to Babel, from Babel to Rome, from Rome to the cross, and from there to us. Biblical prophecy is coming true before your eyes, and to understand it, you must discern the times both then and now. It's time to unravel the threads of this all-encompassing prophetic paradox. It's time to unravel Revelation.
Welcome to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we are so happy you joined us once again in the barn. And thanks you to everybody who helped out with the barn, whether through financial aid or through your prayers.
Absolutely. We are delighted that we can work in this dedicated space. We look forward to the times when we can bring additional guests into the barn here and bring them to you. We've been blessed over the years through various prophecy conferences and through starting this whole journey as podcasters, interviewing prophecy scholars, which has led us.
Of podcasting.
Yes, the old geezers of podcasting. Pretty sure that's what OG stands for.
The original geezers. I think original geezers.
Original geezers. But that it led us into our own study and led to what we are doing here. We pray that you get some benefit from this. Thank you for giving us your time and your attention. And we do our best every time we come out here because we've got this space that you helped put together.
Yes.
To do our very best to bring you the studies that we can. And again, to do so without insisting that you agree with us or else. Because we know, and the older we get, the more we realize we don't know. And so we'll do our best here, but we, again, reserve the right to change our minds if new information or better understanding, better analysis comes along.
By the way, if you're sitting there and you didn't watch last week's program, you need to go back and catch it. But yes, I'm still blinking. I'm in the same clothes because I still have the eye infection. And probably we'll do a third program from this set. So I'm going to be blinking. I'd love to be wearing a cap. We need a Gilbert House TV ball cap for me to be wearing.
Well, there you go. And we'll talk about the shirts and coffee mugs in after the break today. But this is something it's been afflicting her for some time now, and it leaves her very light sensitive. And of course, sitting on a set to make sure that we're properly lit so that you can see us without shadows across our faces. There are bright lights around us.
Yeah, so I have to put antibiotics in my eye and all kinds of stuff in my eyes.
Well,
but I'm trying to see more clearly.
Yeah. And that is good, both from an academic standpoint and physically, being able to see is important. Well, we talked at the end of last week's program about the Hebrew phrase from which the name Armageddon derives. It is almost taken as a given among many prophecy teachers today that Armageddon, Har, Magedon, Har being the Hebrew word for mountain, refers to Megiddo. And
if you've ever traveled there and you get to the Valley of Megiddo, you go, where's the mountain?
Yeah, that's the problem. From a geographic standpoint, a geologic standpoint, there's no mountain in Megiddo, so it cannot be the Mount of Megiddo, which then begs the question, what is it? And again, back in around 1936, a scholar named Charles Torrey wrote a wonderful article for the Harvard Theological Review. Just a few years ago, another scholar named Meredith Klein wrote another article reinforcing this point that the words in Hebrew, the Har Moed, is the actual phrase behind the term Armageddon. And this is a phrase that we see very rarely in the scriptures, but it's a concept that was very well known in the ancient world, in the ancient Near East, the world of the Bible. It is in Isaiah 14:13. This is, of course, that famous section of scripture that in the King James begins with, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning." In the ESV, it's, "How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn." And that leads to the 5 I wills of the divine rebel. "How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly." And that's that phrase, Har Moed, Mount of Assembly or Mount of the Congregation, in the far reaches of the north. And that's another interesting phrase that connects this to Ezekiel 38 and 39. Far reaches of the north, or the heights of the north, is Yarkate Tzafon, a reference to Mount Tzafon, which was the mountain sacred to Baal, the storm god. But in the ancient world, it was also sacred to Zeus, because that's where he defeated the chaos monster Typhon. It was sacred to the storm gods of the Hurrians and the Hittites. It was a sacred, it's known today as Jebel al-Akra. It's in Turkey, very near the site of Antakya, ancient Antioch, where Christians first were called by that name, very close to the border with Syria. We had talked about traveling to Turkey and visiting that mountain. We were told, no, it's too close to the Syrian border, which is, that side of Syria is under the control of rebels. Can't go there. It's too dangerous.
We still want to go to Turkey. We'll see how that works out.
Right. But that phrase, Har Moed, Mount of Assembly, it was well known in the ancient world that the gods dwelt on mountains. And this is really what inspired my first book, The Great Inception, which was really about the concept of sacred mountains in the ancient world, because a surprising number of really important supernatural events and confrontations took place on mountains. Eden, if you read Ezekiel 28, you find that Eden was a mountain. Yeah, a garden, but a garden on a mountain. And this divine rebel in Isaiah 14, a parallel chapter to Ezekiel 28, was tossed off the mountain. And we talked elsewhere about why we don't believe that this divine rebel referred to is Satan. It's actually Shemiyaza, the leader of that rebellion in Genesis 6, but that's kind of beside the point for this discussion. The way to think about this is like Mount Olympus in the Greek religion. It's where the gods congregated, where the gods met.
They're always fake news versions of the real thing, the metaphysical Mount of Eden, which is in what we would call heaven. We just can't see it anymore. Remember how there's big sword, angel with a big sword, keeping us from accessing it?
Right.
It isn't so much that it's a guardian at a physical gate that we could walk up to and you just slice our heads off. We can't see it.
Right. It's in a different dimension.
That's what the guard is for. We can't see it.
Right. So that's the concept here. I will sit on the Mount of Assembly. The enemy, the fallen realm, led by, currently, according to the New Testament, where Jesus says, Satan has a kingdom, Matthew 12, beginning at verse 22, he is leading a rebellion to extend the power of his kingdom to the Mount of Assembly. Satan's Mount of Assembly, assuming that the identification of Jesus with Baal and with Zeus, Revelation 2:13, is correct. He wanted to take his Mount of Assembly and make it the dominant place, the throne of all creation. In other words, he wants to replace God and his Mount of Assembly.
He wants to be called King of Kings.
Right.
He wants to wear all those crowns.
King of Kings, Lord of Lords. Right. The Mount of Assembly for Yahweh, for Jesus, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Jesus Christ, is the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. We see this in the Psalms where he says, here I will dwell, for I have desired it, referring to Zion. And in fact, there are references in one of the Psalms, I'm going to try to find this here very quickly, Psalm 48, I believe, that, that compares the Mount of Assembly of Baal, Satan, to God's Mount of Assembly. Psalm 48, verse 1, great is Yahweh and greatly to be praised in the city of our God. His holy mountain, beautiful in elevation, is the joy of all the earth. Now here's the phrase. It's actually wordplay in the Hebrew. Mount Zion in the far north, the city of the great king. Now look, even in David's time, and this is a song, a psalm of the sons of Korah. So we're talking 3,000 years ago. Even then, they had enough knowledge of geography to know that Mount Zion is not in the far north.
No, but cosmic north.
Cosmic north it is, and that is the difference. The phrase, and this is Psalm 48, verse 2, is, again, a bit of wordplay. In Hebrew, it's Har Tzion Yarkate Tzafon. You see here the similarities in Tzion and Tzafon. Yarkate Tzafon, the far north, the heights of the north, the sides of the north, that's the same phrase that we see in Isaiah 14, where the divine rebel wants to establish his Har Moed, his Mount of Assembly. What the psalmist here is saying, the sons of Korah are saying, is Har Zion, the Mount of Zion, God's holy mountain, is superior to Yarkate Saphon, that mountain where Baal's palace is located.
Even though it's not nearly as high.
That's true.
Physically, this is not strictly physical. It's comparing the earthly kingdom by the fallen realm with the true kingdom, which is truly higher.
Yes, yes, that's exactly what's happening there. And there are other references to this in Scripture. In fact, the word Saphon is, to this day, in Hebrew, the word for the compass point north. But that was not the case for the other Semitic languages related to Hebrew in the ancient world. The word was Simal. The reason Saphon became the word for north in Hebrew is because of the importance of Baal to their pagan neighbors, and because that was also the direction that human invaders always came in the ancient world. There's a great big desert to the east of Israel, so invading armies couldn't cross the Syrian desert to get to Israel. They would have to go to Palmyra and then come down the road to Damascus and then come down from the north. So whether it's a human invader or supernatural evil, it would always come from Saphon, from the north.
And may I say, maybe part of that is because, as we mentioned last week, the Euphrates is mentioned twice in the trumpets and in the bowls, that you get this. No, or is it trumpets and bowls?
Right.
The
Revelation 9, Revelation 16.
Euphrates, the four angels, and then in the bowls, it dries up.
Yes.
So access to the spirit realm to cross over has been denied, blocked.
Yes.
He has blocked the travelers so far.
Yes, that is true.
The day's coming when that's going to be temporarily
lifted, right. And as we said last week, that the Euphrates River and the Jordan River were considered liminal boundaries, boundaries where on the other side, the east, is where the spirits dwelt. We even see that in the Exodus. There are a couple of stations in the Exodus that are very near Mount Nebo, across from Jericho, where one is called Ovoth, which means spirits of the dead. What a great name for your town. And then the next one, or just anyway, just a stopping point. But the other was called Ayi HaAvarim, meaning ruins of the travelers, probably at the base of the site of ancient Sodom, where there were some 1,500 dolmens at the time. There are only a few left now because many of them have been recycled because the big stones were useful for construction over the years. But that location, that area east of the river, the Jordan River across from Jericho, the mountains of the travelers, mountains of Avarim, ruins of the travelers, again, travelers being a term for the spirits of the giants destroyed in the flood. And that word travelers appears again in Ezekiel 39 as the final battle location in the war of Gog and Magog, the valley of the travelers east of the sea.
Okay, I'm going to throw a spanner in your works. Daystar, son of the morning, son of
Halel
Shachar.
ben Shachar, right.
Shachar, the rising sun. The day star that is brightest as the sun's coming up is Venus.
Yes.
Inanna.
That's a really good point, yes.
Now,
indeed.
mind you, Inanna is a goddess, but this is an entity that had no gender in heaven.
This is very interesting. The scholars have written about this. By the time of Moses and the time of David, the time of Isaiah in the 7th century, 8th, 7th centuries BC, Isaiah being the one who wrote this phrase, O day star, son of dawn, Halel ben Shachar, the entity called Inanna, represented by the planet Venus, Astarte, she had split by this point into two separate entities in the Canaanite pantheon.
Yes, male and female.
Astarte, who is the goddess of sex, and Athtar, the war god, or Attar. And there is a myth among the Canaanites that when Baal was temporarily dead, he'd been defeated by Mot, the death god, that Athtar, the war god, who was represented by Venus in the morning, Astarte was Venus at night, but the morning star was Attar, the war god. He tried to fill Baal's throne and found that his feet didn't touch the floor. So he didn't do that. He went down to earth instead, but he could not take Baal's place at the head of the pantheon. But the worship of Atar continued, and I will point this out, that even as late as the time of Muhammad in the 7th century AD, the founder of Islam, that the only deity worshipped by all the various tribes of Arabia, he was not the head of the pantheon, but he was worshipped by all the tribes of Arabia, was Atar, the war god, the male aspect of Inanna.
Continuing on this before the break, and we may have to talk about it after the break, because it just occurred to me. Now, I still think you're right, because Hallel is very close to Enlil or Elil, which you say is Shemyaza. I think Inanna is trying to co-opt and rule over everything that Shemyaza once ruled over.
Oh, I agree.
And Satan's allowing it.
Yes, for his own purposes.
Yeah. So when how thou art fallen, what if that's Inanna falling? The fake version of Shemyaza.
That's a really interesting
Spanner in the works.
prospect.
That's what I do for a living.
Yeah, yeah. And again, in the King James is, "O Lucifer, son of the morning."
Well, that was,
Yeah.
we'll make up a word because we're not really sure what this means.
Well, anyway, there are some scholars who've written papers arguing that Isaiah 14 may in fact relate to that Ugaritic myth of Atar, the war god, fallen from
now,
heaven.
that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
What is also interesting is that, again, Inanna is this gender fluid entity.
Right.
And really ruling over a gender fluid society, and we're going to have to go to a break. But if this is the entity falling, then yeah, it doesn't matter, male or female. It
Yes.
is being pulled down, as we see. Babylon has fallen. The whore of Babylon pulled down. The whore, a guy in a dress.
Yeah.
Break.
Well, we need to take a break. We'll come back. We'll continue discussing this, the Har Moed, the Mount of Assembly, and its relation to Armageddon, straight ahead on Unraveling Revelation. Giants, gods, dragons, they're all real. We may not see them with our natural eyes, but their handiwork is evident in what's happening in the world around us, the spiritual warfare taking place.
It is so true. It's obvious in Israel, but worldwide. Historically, we've seen this happen. And we want you to get excited about the Old Testament and the New and the giants, gods, and dragons within it, because your kids need this information. So do you.
Yes. We're living in prophetic times. Help make sense of it with our special offer through July. Our book, Giants, Gods, and Dragons, which takes a fresh look at end times prophecy. My book's Bad Moon Rising, about the spiritual forces behind Islam, and Last Clash of the Titans, the overlap between what we were told is Greek mythology and the Bible, and our DVD based on the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. All of this, an $80 value for just $45 plus shipping and handling, now through July, only at our online store, gilberthouse.org/store. Welcome back to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and if we had coffee, we'd be drinking it right now. But we want to remind you to go to gilberthouse.org/travel for all of the information about upcoming Israel tours and possible changes of dates. Please go there every week and check it. And also follow our X feeds and our Facebook feeds, because we always post stuff like that there. And we'll put it on our app. Why don't you have the app?
Get the app, gilberthouse.org/app. All of our content is there. You've also got a link there to our streaming video site, which we need to point out. We keep forgetting that it's there. gilberthouse.org/video. A talk that I gave in Ohio just a few weeks ago about our tour of Israel. So if you want to get a look at what we saw while we were on the ground in Israel in May, you can find that video. It's a 1-hour talk presented at the Harvest Revival Center in Brookville, Ohio. It is free. You don't need to sign up. You can go there, just click on it, and you can get the 1-hour talk, shared video, shared images that we captured while we were there, and explained why we were willing to go and why we stand with Israel.
We do indeed. By the way, Miss Bunny is here because we have so many bunny trails.
Rabbit
here
trails,
in the barn.
yes.
Rabbit trails all over the place. But I love bunny trails.
And they do keep us interested. I mean, you know, if the physical body can decay, as long as we can still think, I'm happy.
Me too.
Because people who get bored with living, I'm telling you, I just don't understand it.
Me neither.
I do not understand
I
it.
love every day. So this Hallel ben Shachar.
Yes, this entity, and we've talked about this before, a scholar named William Gallagher about 30 years ago wrote a paper showing that this Hallel was the Hebrew form of the name of an entity well known in Mesopotamia. Elil to the Akkadians, Enlil to the Babylonians. He was the father god of the Mesopotamian pantheon. He fathered all of the other deities, or most of them anyway, according to their beliefs. He was also known as Dagon. He was known as Milcom to the Ammonites, which means he was Molech to the Hebrews. He was also known as Saturn and Kronos. This is all in my book, The Second Coming of Saturn. But we see imperfectly, as you said last week, into a darkened room looking in a mirror. Everything's backward and insufficiently lit.
And if by some chance this is a polemic about the fall of the whore, a fall of Inanna, fall of Athtar, whatever aspect of that gender fluid entity it is, it would be the parallel to the pre-flood fall of Shemyaza.
Yeah.
And as queen of the underworld, she is also king of the underworld.
Right.
Because gender fluidity. Which is what Shemyaza is.
That is correct.
Molech is Melech, it's king.
King. And Inanna, we believe, is the great prostitute, Revelation 17, 18, who then is destroyed with the cry of the angel, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. We see the prophecies of the fall of Babylon in Isaiah.
Maybe that's why there are two falls, fallen, fallen.
Interesting thought. Yeah.
Bunnies.
But again, the Mount of Assembly, the Har Moed, as Charles Torrey, as Meredith Klein, other scholars have pointed out, when it was transliterated into Greek by John for the site of the final battle, because this is for control of the holy mountain of God, where he will dwell forever, was complicated by the fact that there's a character in Hebrew called the ayin, which is sort of like a glottal stop. It's like the letter G, but it's right at the back of your throat, instead of G. So John had to find a corresponding letter. The closest available in Hebrew, or rather in Greek, is gamma, which is the letter G in English. So scholars translating the Greek into English years ago assumed that the letter in Hebrew, the original letter, was gimel, which is that G sound instead of that glottal stop. And that's where we get Har Magedon and the idea that it's Megiddo rather than Jerusalem as the final battle site. But there are plenty of scriptures in the Old Testament, a couple that are very clear about the final battle taking place at Jerusalem, specifically in the book of Zechariah, Zechariah 12, Zechariah 14. Zechariah 12 that talks about a remnant of the house of Judah and the house of David specifically in Jerusalem. And this is on the context of the day of the Lord, where God brings all the nations against Jerusalem. That's why Jerusalem is a cup of staggering to the nations. If that is true, and if Messiah returns, as he's promised to do, on the Mount of Olives, why would that happen if the battle was taking place 50 miles away at Megiddo?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, we didn't look up the 168 miles.
Ah.
Oh, next program, we promise.
Yep, I will so do. Anyway, so the final battle of the age, Armageddon, is not at Megiddo. It is at Jerusalem because it is being fought for the Temple Mount. Now, this is obviously going to be a huge battle because we believe, and we can get into this next week, why the connections between Revelation 19 specifically and Ezekiel 38 and 39 connect the battle of Gog and Magog with the final battle of Armageddon. There are some very strong parallels there. But as you pointed out, and we should probably wrap on this idea, is that a false Gog-Magog conflict, which again the Jews are looking for, because for them in their scriptures this is the final battle that brings forth Messiah. And Jewish religious scholars, as we've been tracking for the last 15 years, have been saying since the beginning of the Syrian civil war in 2011 that was the war of Gog and Magog. A dynamic leader, if there was a war, and by the time you're seeing this, there may be an intensified conflict between Israel and Iran's proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah.
Give me time, I want to explain that before we wrap up today, so give me a minute.
Okay. There are those who will see a dynamic political or military or both leader save Israel from this coalition, and he or may well be welcomed as the Messiah, but it would be a false Messiah, which, if you were to look at this in Greek, would be Antichristos, Antichrist.
Exactly. And this is something chaos is setting up.
Yeah, I agree.
And in order to do that, chaos needs to get rid of the current queen of the world.
Inanna,
She's in the way, but she's setting it all up. I just really wanted to say that last week's program would have been playing, these air on Monday, right?
We released them on Monday, so it would have been released on Tisha B'Av, yeah.
Tisha B'Av, the 9th of the month of Av, is historically a day of mourning. Both temples were taken down, destroyed on the 9th of Av.
Right.
First temple, second temple. It is thought by many Jewish prophecy scholars that something will happen to initiate Gog and Magog on the 9th of Av. I do not know, because as we record this, today's the 6th?
Today is August 7th.
7th of August. So we have 5 days before Tisha B'Av hits for us. As you're watching this, it's in the past. It is now thought by many political pundits that Iran may well launch the massive missile attack against Israel, which may include their proxies from Lebanon and Yemen, and maybe even elsewhere.
Yeah, and of course Gaza.
Well, Gaza, yes, indeed. That from all 4 directions, Israel may get attacked. I think this, especially if it happens on the 9th of Av, that many Jews are going to be looking for Messiah.
Right. And if Erdogan of Turkey, the president of Turkey, fulfills his promise, his threat to invade Israel as part of this
King of the North.
And that again is the location of Yarkate Tzafon, which is the connection to Ezekiel 38, because the far reaches of the north in Ezekiel 38, that's the phrase that we see in Isaiah 14, Yarkate Tzafon, Mount Tzafon, the cosmic north rallying point for the armies of Gog of Magog. It is not a reference to Russia. I mean, I know you look at a map, you do the uttermost north, and that's Russia is as uttermost north as you can get, but in a cosmic sense, it points to Turkey.
Now, Russia may get involved in this.
Sure, absolutely.
Because Russia has delivered material, war material, all sorts of missiles, some of them high-class, very fast missiles.
Yes.
So we don't know what's going to happen. You've already watched it because you're in the future.
We will see, but it is conceivable, looking at the coalition that is aligning against Israel, both there and in the West, with the protesters chanting from the river to the sea, we may be seeing what could very easily be a deception, a false Gog-Magog conflict, and that could lead to the rise of the one that the Bible calls Antichrist. We will know. We keep watching, and we thank you for watching. This is Unraveling Revelation.
Unraveling Revelation is a viewer-supported outreach of Gilbert House Ministries. We'd love to hear from you. Contact us through our websites or drop us a line at P.O. Box 78, Crane, Missouri 65633.